The Midlands Air Festival is now in its 5th edition, and it's a show that we have never missed. This year featured the familiar favourites that give this event such a strong sense of identity, plus some enthusiast-pleasing visitors from overseas. Welcome to Ragley Hall for an event that is far more than just an airshow. 6 hours of daily flying displays, yes, but an event that also features remote control models, hot air balloons, fireworks and more. It is a showcase of aviation in all its forms, taking place in the most delightful of settings. Let's take a look at the lineup and running order. The Red Arrows open the programme, followed by the other RAF displays, then some solo aerobatics. The first UK flying display appearance in over a decade by a Sabre is 20 minutes from now, Jet Provost next, and then the Barnstormers. Rare helicopter displays after that, Sea King and Bulko Bo105, then the Piston Warbirds, including the R4D visiting from the USA. Spitfires, B-17 and the RAF Falcons end the flying display, and then it's into Nightfire, featuring Pyrotechnic evening performances. But before the flying display began, there was a chance to see an unusual helicopter type, the Bell 47, which is celebrating its 80th anniversary this year. 7 Bell 47s arrived into the show on the Saturday morning and took up position along the crowd line, departing again over the course of Sunday afternoon. The Bell 47 was the first helicopter to be certified for civilian use, but it was also used extensively in military service. The main military version was the H-13 Sioux, which was used extensively during the Korean War, predominantly as a scout and reconnaissance aircraft. We'll roll into the main flying display now, and we start with the Red Arrows. The Midlands Air Festival hosted their first public display of the year, but low cloud kept them limited to a rolling show. The Red Arrows jets are due to be retired in 2030, and if the team is to continue, a replacement must urgently be found. The day after the Midlands Air Festival, a strategic defence review was published, and among its 9 air power recommendations, it advised that the RAF's entire Hawk fleet, including the Red Arrows Hawk T1s, should be replaced with a new jet-powered trainer. The Leonardo M346 Master is perhaps the most obvious candidate. It's already being used to train Royal Air Force pilots, it's well placed to meet future RAF training needs due to Leonardo's involvement in the Tempest project, and it's already been selected to equip another European jet aerobatic team, the Frecce Tricolori. The smaller, cheaper and less powerful Leonardo M345 could also be in the running. One of them touched down at Boscombe Down in recent days for testing and evaluation. Starting the second half of the show, the 5-4 split, which returned to the Red Arrows routine last year, having not been seen since 1993. This year's show includes several manoeuvres that are either new or haven't been seen for some time. Coming up next is Twister, last flown in 2016. It'll see Red 5 rolling around the smoke trail of Reds 1 to 4. This is a completely new manoeuvre created by Red 6, called Chainsaw. It's a 2 versus 2 opposition pass with 2 jets inverted and 2 jets erect. This is another new manoeuvre, called Tempest. It's a variation on the popular Hannah Brake and Vortex manoeuvres, both long-standing components of the Red Arrows display. But in this iteration, Red 7 is hiding behind Red 6 to give an illusion that there are only 3 aircraft approaching the crowd, until, that is, they split in 4 directions. The team has also developed a new manoeuvre to end their show, but sadly we can't see it here. The cloud base was simply too low. So instead we got a Red Arrows classic, the Vixen Break. Once again, the Typhoons solo display didn't perform at the Midlands Air Festival, but we did get a flypast from the display jet, plus its spare.
Give them a round of applause.
Opening their season at Ragley Hall was the Royal Air Force's Tutor T1 display team.
As he pulls up at 5G, he converts his speed into height to perform his first manoeuvre, the Hammerhead. Flight Lieutenant Jones was born in Carmarthen, South Wales, and started his flying career in the Royal Air Force in 1989, flying the DC-10 at RAF Red Arrows, and then as a search and rescue pilot on the Sea King.
Because its display pilot, Flight Lieutenant Bob Dews, is in his second and final year at the controls, he's been allowed to fly a little lower this season, 300 feet for aerobatics rather than 500 feet.
Sat now at negative 1G and hanging in his straps, this is not a comfortable position to be in as blood rushes to his head.
The aircraft he's flying is wearing an experimental yellow and black paint scheme. Most of the Tutor fleet is painted white. The Tutor solo display have this aircraft and 3 white Tutors at their disposal, painted with an RAF Roundel and Benevolent Fund heart on the underside, and we should see one of those white aircraft at the Cosford Airshow next week. The Tutor has been mostly replaced in the elementary training role by the much newer and more capable Prefect. However, the Tutor is still used by university air squadrons and for the training and evaluation of flight instructors. The Battle of Britain Memorial Flight is back on the circuit this year after barely flying any shows in 2024 due to the tragic accident which claimed the life of Squadron Leader Mark Long. Here they're flying their Lancaster B1 and clipped-wing Spitfire 16 with special markings paying tribute to Squadron Leader Long and a Spitfire 19. The PR-19, the Spitfire with the rounded wingtips and yellow spinner, hasn't flown at an airshow since 2021, having been the subject of a major maintenance programme since then. She's wearing a new paint scheme, now having adopted the same colours as she wore at Biggin Hill on the 11th of July 1957 at the founding ceremony of the historic aircraft flight, the predecessor of the BBMF. The BBMF's 2025 display sequence is atypical and rather odd. There was no solo aerobatic segment from either of the fighters. In fact, there were almost no aerobatics at all. And the Lancaster's solo routine has also been pared back. No longer does it perform a dirty pass or a flyby with the bomb bay doors open. There are, however, some extra formation passes at the end of the show, several with the 3 aircraft flying in a line-astern formation, and a brand new on-crowd break, after which the Lancaster flies directly over the top of the crowd. Solo aerobatics were well accounted for at the Midlands Air Festival. Here's Lauren Wilson in her Pitts S1S. This is Lauren's first flying display appearance in quite a while. In fact, I think it's her first for 7 years. But she's been keeping current with aerobatic flying, and it shows. This is a Pitts S1S, the standard factory-built single-seater powered by a 180 horsepower Lycoming IO360. But next we're going to see a very different Pitts, a Pitts S08E04 twin-seater, modified into a single-seat aeroplane and then fitted with new wings, a new tailplane, an upgraded Lycoming piston engine and 2 Lynx turbojet engines. This is a one-of-a-kind creation called the Jet Pitts, owned and flown by Richard Goodwin. Its most critical attribute is that, with all 3 engines running at full power, it produces the equivalent of 1,700 pounds of thrust. As the aircraft weighs only 1,550 pounds, this means that it has a thrust-to-weight ratio of greater than 1:1. Building and testing the aircraft was a long 4-year process, but it finally burst onto the airshow scene in 2023. Then Richard discovered that it would be a similarly long process before he knew how to really fly it, but with each passing show, the display is getting more impressive. Here comes the first hovering manoeuvre. In this manoeuvre, Rich will fly into wind at about 15 knots of forward speed at a very high angle of attack. This creates enough airflow over the wings that the ailerons still function, keeping the aircraft just about controllable. In the next manoeuvre, Rich will come to a complete stop with no forward airspeed. Thus, the ailerons will have no effect, and the torque of the propeller will induce the aircraft to start spinning slowly. The Midlands Air Festival isn't all about high-power aerobatics. Here's Tim Dews performing a delightful display in his Silence SA1100 Twister, propelled by an 80-horsepower Jaraboo 2200. The Twister is a German single-seat ultralight inspired by the shape and lines of the Spitfire. It's been built in modest numbers, but it is absolutely adored by those who fly it for its carefree and responsive handling characteristics. Chris Burkett once displayed the Twister on the Airshow circuit, but here he is flying the Extra 300S. As you can see from the paint scheme, this aircraft is part of the Global Stars aerobatic team, and with that team Chris has flown at airshows around the world as far afield as China and India. The Extra 300S is the basic single-seat version of the Extra 300. It was the premier model in the Extra line during the 1990s and the early 2000s, until higher performance versions arrived, like the Extra 330SC. It's got a maximum load factor of plus or minus 10 G and a roll rate of 400 degrees per second, and it's got a 300 horsepower Lycoming AIO540 on the nose. We'll see more of Chris, and indeed more of Tim Dews in the Twister, later on in the programme, as part of the night show. Although it's made of wood rather than carbon fibre, and its basic design dates back to the 1960s, this aircraft, the Fournier RF4, is in some ways just as capable as the Extra 300. It's officially stressed to 11 G. Its roll rate, however, is much slower, thanks to its extremely long wings. Those long wings are designed for maximum lift and efficiency, allowing this aircraft to operate with the most frugal of power plants, a 39 horsepower Volkswagen. This means that fuel consumption is extremely low, less than £30 per hour. Bob calls it aerobatics for peanuts. Perhaps the most exciting announcement for this year's Midlands Air Festival was Mistral Warbird's CL-13B Sabre Mark VI, based in France. This was the first time in over a decade that a Sabre had performed in a British flying display, although its owner and ace aerobatic pilot Frédéric Acquerie has had to develop a special non-aerobatic display routine in order to comply with British regulations, which currently prohibit aerobatic manoeuvres by civilian-operated swept-wing jets. The Sabre rose to prominence during the Korean War, and in all, nearly 10,000 were produced. They were operated by around 30 nations across a number of conflicts, making it one of the first truly successful mass-production jet-powered aircraft. This is a Canadian licence-built version of the Sabre, a Canadair CL-13B Sabre Mark VI. It's generally considered to be the best variant of the Sabre ever produced, not least because it was equipped with the Avro Arenda 14 engine, which was more reliable and 50% more powerful than the engines used on the American versions of the Sabre. Fred owns this aircraft outright and does all the maintenance on it himself. He's a great exponent of this particular Sabre variant, and he believes that it is the most enjoyable warbird that anyone can fly, blending power, turn performance and extremely precise roll control in a way that he says no other aircraft can match. This beautiful Jet Provost T3A stood in for an aircraft that couldn't make it to the show, an L-29 Delphine. The Jet Provost was the world's first jet-powered elementary trainer. The thinking was that all jet training might prove to be more efficient than starting students on piston-powered tail draggers and then converting them to tricycle gear jets later on. And for a time, it worked, although the economics of such a plan proved to be unappealing in the long run. Nonetheless, for a short time the Jet Provost was used as an elementary trainer, and for some RAF recruits this would have been the first aircraft that they would take the controls of. The majority of the Jet Provost service career, though, was as a basic jet trainer, and in that role it served with the Royal Air Force from the 1950s through to the 1990s. It's an aircraft with fine airshow pedigree as well, equipping innumerable Royal Air Force aerobatic teams. The College of Air Warfare had the Magistrates and the Macaws, the Royal Air Force College had the Cranwell Poachers, Number 2 Flight Training School had the Vipers, Number 3 Flight Training School had the Gemini Pair and the Swords, Number 6 Flight Training School had the Cocks of the North, and the Central Flying School had the Sparrows, the Redskins, and, most famously, the Red Pelicans. It's a Red Pelican liveried aircraft that we see here today. Now perhaps the smallest aircraft in the lineup, a Formula 1 racer designed in the early 1950s known as the Cassett Racer 3M. This is a tiny aircraft, just 5 metres long and 4.5 metres wide, powered by a 100 horsepower Continental 0200. It's flown here by its owner, Lee Kingman, and this is only his second airshow appearance.
Across country, we have the Red Bull air racing, which has been happening over recent years, where the aircraft fly through pylons. Oh, this is the waving pass, everyone. Hands in the air, ladies and gentlemen. Give me a big wave.
Speaking of new entrants to the airshow circuit, time now for a world debut. This team is known as the Ballistic Barnstormers. It's a 4-ship team which has evolved from the 2-ship Team Mono. As well as being Britain's newest formation team, this is also Britain's youngest band of airshow pilots. They age from 23 to 30. At the controls, Bruce Buglas, Tom Dews, Ben Dews, and, in normal circumstances, Ben Gilmore, but his aircraft was absent due to an engine problem. The team had to modify their display into a 3-ship routine with just a few hours' notice, and then perform that new show in very blustery conditions. That's no mean feat, because this isn't a conventional performance by any stretch of the imagination. There's no team leader in the normal sense. Everyone is a lead at some point, with each aircraft flying solo and formation manoeuvres in various combinations, often with multiple things happening at any one time. In future, the team intends to execute their show at much lower altitude, and they also plan to introduce barnstorming elements such as flower bombing. The finale of the show is a technically very impressive 3-ship opposition pass. Further barnstorming from the Aero Superbatics wingwalkers with 2 Boeing Stearmans. And Midlands Air Festival favourite Peter Davis was back flying his nimble Rotorsport Calidus autogyro. Here's a much larger Rotary asset, one of historic helicopters' Sea Kings. Specifically, it's an ex-Royal Air Force Sea King HAR-3.
Submarine, search and rescue, airborne, early warning and transport. So a real multi-role helicopter.
Please put your hands in the air, ladies and gentlemen. You can see the side door is opened and the crew will be looking out at you and they will be able to see you, and hopefully if we all wave, they might wave back.
That is absolutely fabulous. It's the UK licensed manufactured version of this.
This is one of several Sea Kings that historic helicopters operate, around 8 I believe in total, including ex-British and Belgian examples. Some are destined for life as civilian warbirds, and some will likely be sold back into military ownership. Indeed, the company has already supplied a Sea King to the armed forces of Ukraine.
It's also a design philosophy as well, because the UK might stem from the British requirement that the helicopter would be more independent of operations, whereas the US Sikorsky's are more under the control of the parent aircraft carrier. So the Royal Navy obviously philosophy and operational philosophy. Royal Navy, of course, the RAF, the German Navy and the Indian Navy. Quite a large rotor diameter, 19 metres, making 55 inside out. Here's all the rotor blades.
Though originally designed for anti-submarine warfare, the Sea King HAR-3 is a long-range search and rescue variant. Deliveries began in 1978 and the type was retired in 2015. Here's a rather more manoeuvrable helicopter, the Flying Bulls Bo105, flying at a British airshow for the first time since 2018. At the controls is the world-famous record-breaking skydiver Felix Baumgartner. Designed in Germany in the 1950s, this was the first fully aerobatic helicopter in the world. What made the difference was the rotor design. Most helicopters, up until that point, had used rigid rotors attached to the rotor head by delicate hinges, so if the helicopter pilot pulled any G, the hinges would bear the brunt of the force. The Bo105 has no hinges. Instead, it features flexible rotor blades bolted directly into a monoblock head. It's the flexible rotors that absorb the G-force, and that means the Bo105 can perform backflips, loops and rolls at up to 3.5 times the force of gravity. The German army operated 212 specialised anti-tank versions of the Bo105 armed with 6 missiles, the first of which was delivered in 1979. It wasn't particularly well suited to high-intensity combat though, and a further 100 Bo105s were also ordered by the German army as light observation aircraft. The last of them was retired in 2016. This is part of the wonderful Salzburg-based Flying Bulls collection, which also includes a DC-6, P-38, B-25, P-51, Corsair, Cobra and Sycamore, among others. Here, a very special airshow appearance from an aircraft that's come all the way from Texas, Douglas R4D, ready for duty of the Commemorative Air Force, which is visiting Europe this summer to mark 80 years since VE Day. It's an aircraft that comes from the same family as the DC-3 airliner and the C-47. R4D is simply its US Navy designation. And it was assigned to VR-3, where her task was to airlift both cargo and wounded personnel. She was then transferred, after the Second World War ended, to VX-1, where she was used to trial new technology, the precise details of which either remain classified or have been lost to time. After a 4,800-mile journey, Ready for Duty touched down at her temporary home at the Imperial War Museum, Duxford, on the 28th of April. That's where she'll be based through until the end of July, and during that time she'll be participating in a great many aviation events, both here in the UK and on the European mainland. Further Second World War aircraft coming up over the next few minutes. Here's a Harvard Mark IV known as Wacky Wabbit and operated by passenger flight provider Warbird Experiences. And now fighters in the form of two Spitfires. First up, the Suffolk Spitfire, a US Army Air Force marked Spitfire 16E owned and flown by George Hay. The Mark 16 is essentially identical to the Spitfire Mark 9, but powered by an American-built Packard Merlin 266 rather than a Rolls-Royce Merlin 66. This one was built in 1945, slightly too late to see wartime service, and was delivered to No. 6 Maintenance Unit at Bryce Norton. She was retired in 1953. Her return to flight came in 1991. The aircraft was then sold to a US owner and crashed in California a few years later. Brought back to the UK, another restoration commenced, which was completed in 2013. In 2020, the aircraft was painted in the colours of Spitfire Mark 9C Porky 2, an aeroplane used by the 309th Fighter Squadron, 31st Fighter Group of the US Army Air Corps, stationed in the Mediterranean Theatre in 1943 and flown by Lieutenant Robert Connor. Now a chance to compare the sound of the Merlin to that of the Griffon. It's the Rolls-Royce Heritage Flight Spitfire PR-19. This Spitfire started out in life as a photo reconnaissance platform involved in the liberation of mainland Europe. Post-war, it became a meteorological research platform before becoming a founding member of the Battle of Britain Memorial Flight, or the Historic Aircraft Flight, as it then was. Now it's the turn of B-17G Flying Fortress Sally B, which this year is marking the 50th anniversary of its operation here in the UK and the 80th anniversary of its first flight. It was built in 1945, too late to see wartime service, and was used by the US Army Air Force and later the French government. Businessman and pilot Ted White purchased it in 1975 and brought it to the UK, and it's been operating at airshows ever since, funded in no small part by public donations. Today, it's the last airworthy B-17 in Europe. Wrapping up the flying display, it's the RAF Falcons, jumping from a Dornier 228.
only display team that actually get to hear the crowd roaring.
The Falcons have gone from strength to strength in recent years, compensating for slightly reduced numbers by introducing some new and very imaginative manoeuvres, such as this one, a brand new addition to the routine for 2025.
Adam's microphone's probably on. Is it on? Always on. Quick, say something incriminating against the white hole. Are they on radio? No, they shout each other. The video of the army ones where they're all tied together for a bit and they're going, they're just screaming at each other. Sure. Oh yeah. That's fun. Light wind, that got a phone from the 90s. Zoom in for the moon. Thanks for that. I'll just stop the video and I'll restart it again.
The conventional flying display isn't the only attraction at the Midlands Air Festival. There are displays by large model aircraft as well, and the hot air balloons are a major attraction, with over 100 of them launching on the Saturday morning. The Friday night fire event is a big draw too, and it featured several flying displays. Here's Tim Dews in the Twister flying in formation with Bob Grimsted in the RF4 ahead of the solo routines. Tim runs Airborne Pyrotechnics, and we've seen their pair of Grob 109s performing at the Midlands Air Festival many times before. However, the company is now particularly busy in the Middle East, having recently displayed at the Saudi Grand Prix, and their Grob 109s couldn't make it back to the UK in time for the Midlands Air Festival, hence us seeing a Twister solo routine in its place. We'll enjoy it next, without commentary. Chris Burkett returned to the Nightfire lineup for the second consecutive year, flying the Extra 300S, the final performance of the programme. That brings us to the end of this episode of Airshow Dispatches, but join us again next week from the RAF Cosford Airshow, showcasing British military aviation past and present, plus the French Rafale and Polish F-16. Until then, thanks for your company. From me, Adam Landau, it's goodbye for now.